Folks, we're here today to do an interview with Dr. Lewis Daniel for ncwaterman.com to address issues with the Marine Legislative Study Committee and also talk about fisheries issues in North Carolina in the year 2012. Dr. Daniel, the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries is well respected for the data that they provide to the Marine Fisheries Commission in the state of North Carolina, probably one of the most respected states along with Louisiana to provide that type of fisheries data. Would you address the accuracy and the truthfulness of that data?
You know, my history in fisheries management going back to graduate school was in quality data, quality information, being able to create master's theses and PhD dissertations that met peer review and scrutiny. My staff is the same way. We take great pride in the quality and the quantity of data that we collect on both the recreational and the commercial fishery, as well as independent information to try to avoid the appearance or the suspect of bias. Probably the biggest point, though, is that we're never going to know with 100% certainty what's going on in the ocean. There are error associated with all of our estimates, but I would put North Carolina's information up against any state in the nation in terms of managing our valuable fishery resources.
Dr. Daniel, let's address this and get it clear for folks once and for all. The North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, you and your staff provide recommendations and data for the Marine Fisheries Commission in the state of North Carolina. You and your staff are not in the regulatory equation, but you do enforce those regulations once they come down from the Marine Fisheries Commission in the state of North Carolina by statute. That is correct, is it not?
That's correct. We make the recommendations, we consolidate the science, we work with our advisory panels and other public to develop fishery management plans, and then the Marine Fisheries Commission reviews and approves those plans.
Dr. Daniel, you've been quoted many times, really misquoted, about your opposition to the Game Fish Bill, or HB 353. If you will, please give us the division and your position as the director on game fish for any fish species in North Carolina.
The position of the Division of Marine Fisheries and is consistent with the position of our Marine Fisheries Commission, and the Governor's Office and the Department. And that is that allocating resources to one user group over another is inconsistent with the Fisheries Reform Act to manage for the benefit of all of our state's user groups.
Dr. Daniel, since there is obviously no biological reason for or against game fish in North Carolina, that leaves us with the total economic return to the state. Now, we have those figures, and you presented those to the Marine Legislative Study Commission up in Raleigh. Now, those figures are basically going to vary from year to year, but if you will, tell us about which figure is the higher and the ones that you use for comparison in Raleigh.
The higher overall value was the recreational fishery. For the most recent time frame, it was about $1.7 billion, I believe, and the commercial fishing value was around $300 million. And that includes all of the multipliers that we use for those various calculations. The important thing to note there, and what I tried to point out at the study committee, was that those numbers were simply intended to show the value of the fisheries to the state of North Carolina.
Dr. Daniel, you and your staff at the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries are charged with obeying all the state statutes of the state of North Carolina. The Marine Fisheries Commission has also taken an oath before they can serve to support those same statutes. Fisheries Reform Act of 1997 is obviously state statute now, and you support that, very fervently. If there are to be other statutes as they come along, whether it's game fish or the menhaden reduction fishery or anything else that comes into state statute and becomes state law, you will support those state statutes just as you have other statutes in the past. Is that correct?
I don't see any difference between one statute or another. I mean, my responsibility is to enact the statutes that are handed down by the General Assembly. We take that job very seriously. So whatever changes are to come in this General Assembly and in this upcoming sessions, we will implement those recommendations or requirements just like we have any other.
Dr. Daniel, one of the most contentious issues I've seen along the coast of North Carolina is what happens if HB 353 or the Game Fish Bill becomes state statute. I've heard from charter boat captains and guides along the coast of North Carolina that they feel that they'll no longer be able to maintain keeping a recreational limit for their patrons. Please address this, because this has caused a lot of confusion along the entire coast of North Carolina.
I've heard those concerns. From my perspective, the recreational for-hire sector is recreational, and therefore they'd be allowed to retain their bag limits, their patrons' bag limits, and the like. The way other states handle it, I believe that's consistent with the way other states handle it. But the General Assembly would ultimately decide if they wanted to change that. But my intent in implementing that, if I had to, would be to allow the recreational for-hire sector to retain their bag limits of those fish.
Good. As we close up, if you were sitting at a table with recreational and commercial fishermen, one beside the other, what would you really want to tell them about managing for the resource here in North Carolina?
Well, as we all know, these are very contentious issues, and they pit one user group against another, and that's unfortunate. What I would tell anybody that asked is that what we need to do is manage for sustainability. We need to manage for a sustainable harvest. If we put the resource first, and we all agree that the science is good, that we're going to take the necessary reductions we need, we can manage for sustainability, we can maintain the history and the culture of commercial and recreational fishing, and we don't have to take a side one way or the other.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
My pleasure.